Mr. Louis Chua.
Question 11, please.
Sir, may I have your permission to take this question by Mr. Louis Chua and the two questions filed by Mr. Leong Man Wai in yesterday's order paper, please?
Yes, please proceed.
Sir, Singapore is a trusted, vibrant, and well-regulated international financial center in Asia, one of the fastest-growing regions in the world. Naturally, this has attracted a wide range of investors, including global and regional institutional investors, as well as individual investors. Family offices are one particular category of individual investment. MAS does not have comprehensive data on fund inflows into Singapore through family offices because such detailed data is not necessary for MAS to carry out its functions of ensuring macroeconomic and financial stability. But please allow me to share what we have. Mr. Louis Chua shared or asked about wealth flows, while Mr. Leong Man Wai asked about foreign funds inflows through family offices. I take their interests to be in investments made by high-end individual investors. Now, the investor type closest to high-end individual investors in MAS's annual asset management survey is the category called non-retail individual clients. Now, this category includes family offices, clients of external asset managers, private trusts, and high net worth individuals. Based on this survey, the assets under management, or AUM, of foreign non-retail individual clients managed by financial institutions in Singapore increased by about 470 billion Singapore dollars from 2017 to 2021. Now, this makes up about 20% of the increase in total AUM by Singapore's asset management industry from that same period, 2017 to 2021. Also, the growth of assets from these high-end individual clients has been broadly similar to that of overall AUM. Let me explain. This, in other words, means that there has been a much broader pickup of funds flowing into Singapore's wealth management industry, but it's not peculiar to these high-end individual clients. As for family offices, there is no breakdown for family offices in particular in the MAS annual survey which I cited. However, SFOs that apply for and granted tax incentives by MAS managed about Singapore $90 billion worth of assets as at 2021. Now, this is less than the 2% of the $5.4 trillion in assets managed in Singapore as at 2021. In short, the bulk of the increase in AUM in Singapore is attributable to institutional investors. Non-retail individual clients account for a small proportion, and family offices even less. Mr. Louis Chua and Mr. Leong Man Wai asked for a breakdown by source countries of wealth inflows, and for Mr. Leong Man Wai, specifically for family offices. Based on the asset management survey, non-retail individual clients come from a wide range of places. The most granular breakdown of foreign source funds is available by regions, rather than by specific countries. Now, this is no different from surveys published by financial sector authorities or industry associations in major wealth management centers like London, Hong Kong, and Switzerland. What we are providing below on the regional breakdown for non-retail individual client in fact goes beyond what these other jurisdictions, which I mentioned earlier, publish. Because these jurisdictions rather, do not put out data on specific categories of investors like individual investors. So the top sourced foreign region for the increase in Singapore's AUM for high-end individual investors from that period, 2017 to 2021, was the Asia Pacific, as is to be expected. This accounted for slightly over half of AUM sourced from high-end individual investors. The Asia Pacific region was followed by Europe and then the Americas. Mr. Leong Man Wai asked how much SFOs have applied for tax incentives since April 2022 have invested in local investments. We do not yet have the data as these SFOs have 2 years from their point of application to meet the local investment requirements that MAS just introduced in April 2022, so just 1 year ago. So we are just within this 2-year implementation period. So data on the volume of assets is currently not available. Members of the House should note, however, that while assets are managed in Singapore by entities that are based in Singapore, most of these assets are invested outside of Singapore. And this is understandable, as the investment universe is much larger outside of Singapore. And investors use Singapore as a financial center to access investment opportunities in our region and also beyond our region. But as these assets are managed in Singapore, they help to create jobs and value added in our financial industry. There are also positive spillovers to other sectors, as these investors often appoint tax and legal professionals for wealth planning and also operational matters. So it benefits our financial industry and beyond. Mr. Leong Man Wai also asked about the impact of the inflow of foreign funds through family offices on our official foreign reserves, the private property market, and inflation. Please allow me to set the context. The bulk of gross inflows into Singapore comprise flows by financial institutions and other non-financial corporates, not high-end individual investors, and even less so family offices, which are only one category within the latter. To reiterate, most of the funds that are managed here are invested in assets outside of Singapore. Hence, they typically remain in foreign currencies. This is to your second point about the impact on OFR, or official foreign reserves. So most funds are managed here, are invested outside, and they also typically remain in foreign currencies, and thus have little or no effect on the Singapore dollar exchange rate or our official foreign reserves, OFR. If some of these inflows do get converted into Singapore dollars, they would, just like all net capital inflows into Singapore dollars, generate some appreciation pressure on the exchange rate. And MAS addresses such pressures regardless of the source of funds as part of its regular market operations to achieve its monetary policy objectives. Now, we have not seen unusual surges of capital into the Singapore dollar that have required a pronounced response on the part of MAS. And certainly not from family offices, which, to reiterate, would not form a significant proportion of the total flow of funds for management out of Singapore. Your third question by Mr. Leong Man Wai is on the impact on inflation. Well, as for inflation, it has little to do with foreign funds inflow into Singapore, let alone the portion due to family offices. The step up in core inflation since late 2021 was primarily due to the sharp increases in global energy, imported food prices, and stronger domestic wage growth. Now, these cost increases fed through to higher electricity and gas, food and essential services prices, and accounting for nearly 75% of MAS's core inflation in 2022. Now, the impact on the private property market. Some foreign funds do flow into the private property market. However, purchases by foreigners have been relatively low, at about 4% of all private residential property purchases on average over the past 3 years. More specific to Mr. Leong's question, family offices themselves have had virtually no impact on our private housing market, as there was no residential property transaction attributable to family offices over the last 6 years. Thank you.
Mr. Louis Chua.
I thank the MOS for its very comprehensive replies. Just two quick SQs. The first is in relation to my PQ. I understand the MOS point about the level of granularity provided, but I was just wondering, in relation to the 14th April press release by the MAS, I think it did state that the source of overall inflows into Singapore is diversified. So just wondering if there's any further granularity that the MOS can provide to assure the public that of the level of dispersion or the concentration risk of any particular source country, just to put it out there. Second is in relation to the PQ, which was filed by Mr. Leong. I also understand that at this point in time, because they are not at the 2-year mark as mentioned by MOS, we do not yet have that data. But in terms of the level of local investment requirement, I recognize that this is indeed a good thing. But given that, as MOS mentioned, most of it will presumably be invested in overseas markets, in overseas assets, is there a push by the government or the MAS to over time nudge some of these companies to invest in local companies a little bit more, especially in the last category when it comes to non-listed Singapore incorporated companies, since these tend to give a greater multiplier effect.
Mr. Chua, if I can ask you to wrap it up. MOS Alvin Tan.
I thank the member for his SQ. I think I talk about the first SQ, which is effectively on source country breakdown. I mentioned earlier on that, in fact, the source region is the Asia Pacific region, followed by the Europe and Americas. And this is actually, we've given more detail because, as I mentioned earlier on, none of the centers, of those centers that publish survey, quite similar to our MAS survey that I mentioned, none publish source country details, and some also do not even publish regional breakdowns. So we have done so. So I think that would suffice in terms of source country breakdown. With regards to the second question, I think I had responded to one of the members' questions with regards to the requirements for SFO. We are still within the 2-year period, so I encourage the member and other members of this House to ask again after the 2-year period. Thank you.
Mr. Leong Man Wai.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the MOS for the comprehensive answer, especially regards to my 2 PQs, which was not successfully rolled over, actually, for today's oral PQ. Thanks for your answer. However,
I should clarify that the response was that the 2 PQs yesterday that were filed would be answered via MOS Alvin Tan's response today,
yes,
together with Mr. Louis Chua.
Yes.
So it was made known that the responses would be made today.
Oh, yes, yes. It was in the written circular, yeah.
That's right.
Yes, yes.
So
Thank you.
I want to be clear that
Yes.
there wasn't
Yes, yes. So I thank
any avoidance in terms of answering the questions.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. However, the MOS answer mainly center on the family office. Of course, I mean, that is how I phrased the question as well. So I do not know whether it's fair to ask him now to answer one SQ on what exactly, what is the impact of the total foreign inflow on our OFR, the official foreign reserves, on top of the family office, everything, yeah, for the last 2 to 3 years, yeah. Thanks.
MOS Alvin Tan.
So just 2 points. First is that we have every intention of answering those questions. You have reached out to me also, and we specifically, I think it wasn't, you did not put in time for it to be rolled over, and so it was converted to written. And the team had very specifically noted that we wanted to answer both questions by Mr. Louis Chua as well as yourself as comprehensively as possible, which I have done so. Your questions on foreign foreign fund inflow, it was specific to SFOs. So if you wanted to answer a broader question with regards to overall foreign funds inflow, may I ask you to file a separate PQ, which we'll be happy to take on another sitting. Thank you.
Mr. Leon Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Just a narrow clarification for the MAS. If I heard him correctly, he said that foreigners accounted for 4% of private property transactions in the last 3 years. Can I just confirm that does that class, or rather, I just want to clarify this, that classify PRs as foreigners? And is this, up until what point is this data available? I mean, is it at the end of last year, and we're counting the last 3 years from the end of last year backwards or so on. Just wanted to clarify on that. Thank you.
MOS Alvin Tan.
Thank the member for his SQ. Maybe just let me give you a broader view. The foreigners' share of private housing purchase has dropped from about 20% in 2011 to about a low of 3 to 4% over the past few years. 3 to 4% over the past few years. Coming out of the pandemic, the share has remained limited about 7% in the first quarter of 2023. So again, if you wanted more questions, I asked the member to file a separate PQ on foreign housing. Thank you.